Yo, what's up? Welcome back for another episode of the See-Through Podcast. I'm the host, Lance Johnson, and this is my podcast where I have transparent conversations with amazing people from the disability and blind community. I myself live with Retinitis Pigmentosa, or RP for short, which is a retinal disease that is causing me to go blind. All right, so let me just get this out there first. I'm back with another solo episode because there's been a lot happening out there in the real world. You know, things that if I don't cover now are just gonna be lost in this very quick news cycle we have going. So I figured, all right, seize the moment, talk about these topics while they're hot. So I think if you're listening and you're invested in the blind community, you're invested in the disability community, these topics will all be super topical and relevant to you. I think you'll find them interesting, and I'm excited to talk about this with you all. But before this episode begins, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and make sure that you have followed the podcast on social media. The handle is at See-Through Pod. And if you want bonus and exclusive See-Through Podcast material, the only place you'll find it is on Patreon. So consider helping the podcast grow by becoming a Patreon subscriber. The link to all of that is in the show description. All right, let's get this solo episode started. But first, let me give you guys a quick update since the last solo episode. You know, in the last episode, I mentioned a few things. You know, I started therapy. I'm still doing that. I'm enjoying it. For those of you who don't know, I use betterhelp.com, and I've been talking to a therapist once a week, and it's been very helpful. I'm not going to go in depth on therapy and what I'm talking about and all that, but I did want you guys to know that I'm still going to therapy, and I'm looking at it like this. You know, for the longest time, I put off dealing with RP, you know, pretended I didn't have it. I didn't talk about it. I tried to not think about it. If it popped up into my mind, I pushed it out. And now I have this podcast, the See-Through Podcast, and I'm open about it all the time, and it's helped me tremendously. So the way I'm treating therapy is like that, but with other aspects of my life that's not RP. And sometimes RP does come up in my therapy sessions, but how I'm treating this is, you know, what else am I suppressing? What else am I not wanting to talk about? You know, what else can I benefit from, you know, instead of suppressing, you know, letting out and thinking about and processing, you know. So that's how I'm treating therapy. For those of you out there who are, you know, suppressing something or bottling something up, whether it be something about your disability or just a relationship or money or whatever, therapy might help you. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Also, recently, I've been active on TikTok, and I finally understand what all the fuss is about TikTok. I'm having a lot of great interactions on there, a lot of people commenting, you know, more so than Instagram, more so than YouTube, you know. So it's been fun. I'm gaining new listeners on there, and I'm interacting with a larger community. It's a lot of fun. So if you're not on TikTok and you want to connect and network with more people from the disability community or the blindness community, I highly recommend TikTok. It's full of amazing people. And if you're on TikTok and you haven't followed me, make sure to follow me on TikTok. You know, my handle is See-Through Pod, which is the same as Instagram, Twitter, and all that jazz. Also, the last thing I'll update you on is that my birthday is this week. I am turning 32 years old. And someone asked me the other day, they're like, how old are you? And I had to do math. 32 is not this like big birthday, you know. At this point, they're all going to mesh together. But I actually had to do the math. I was like, how old am I turning? I didn't know. But I'm turning 32 this week, and I'm excited. I have a fun trip. I'm going upstate with my wife, and we're going to do some hiking, go to some breweries, you know, relax, have some R&R. So I'm excited for that. You might see some stuff from that trip as well. All right, so before I start talking about these current events that I promised to talk about, I wanted to bring something up for the fellas out there who also have retinitis pigmentosa like myself. It's bad news, fellas. And you know what? Let me put some sunglasses on for this because it's a little shameful what I'm going to be talking about, and it's a little I don't know. You fellas, you'll understand. For the women out there, if you have a husband with RP, they should probably know about this. Boyfriend RP, boy toy, whatever it is you got going on in your life, this is for you. But let me get into it. I don't want to keep you guys, I don't want to keep this suspense going. Okay. As you know, if you've been following my podcast, you know I don't have any sponsors, but I listen to a lot of podcasts with sponsors. And I listen to a lot of podcasts that are hosted by male comedians. And a lot of those podcasts that are hosted by male comedians have sponsors. And I've seen this product be advertised on these podcasts very regularly. And I've seen it enough to one day it piqued my curiosity. And I clicked on it to learn more. And that product is Blue Chew. Blue Chew. Which is basically Viagra. Because it has the same active ingredients that Viagra or Cialis or, what all those pills have, basically. So, I get bombarded, I'm like, let me try this out. Let me look at it. Let me see what this is about, These comedians hyping it up. They're making funny jokes, and so I look into it, all right? And my curiosity got me. That's the story I'm sticking to. I don't need them. Sorry, that's TMI, but I don't need them. But hey, a little boost though, what's wrong with a little boost? Sorry if my mom's listening or whatever. And please feel free to skip to the next section if you don't want to hear about boner pills. So I click on Blue Chew. I go to investigate more. And what do I find? In the safety warnings of the product. And keep in mind, this is with the same thing for Viagra and all those other pills. It straight up says, in fact, let me read it, since, I'm not a wiener scientist, so I don't have all this stuff memorized. So I'm going to read off some stuff to you about these products. Again, this is targeted for those men out there with retinitis pigmentosa. So it's something you'll want to know. All right. So this is what I found. I went to the website. I'm showing you how I found it. I didn't have to dig that deep. I click on, learn more or whatever. I click on this and then it leads me to here to safety precautions, like I said. But this caused me to do my own research, So here's what I found. So this was a study from Australia. It said Australian researchers say sildenafil, I don't know if I'm saying that right, which is a key ingredient in Viagra, Blue Chew, Cialis, all those, may permanently affect the vision of men with eye problems. It is already known that sildenafil, the active ingredient in erectile dysfunction medications, can cause temporary vision problems in healthy people. Doctors warn that the treatment may not be safe if a person has retinitis pigmentosa. It just straight up says it. And which is one of the most common inherited diseases of the retina. And so I asked, well, why? Why is that? And it said people who develop recessive retinitis pigmentosa commonly have 2 copies of the mutant PDE6 gene. I didn't know that. It said, however, there are carriers of the disease who just have 1 copy of the faulty gene, yet they're not affected and have normal vision. So, they're carriers of RP, but they're not affected by it. And the way erectile dysfunction drugs work to combat impotence may also inhibit PDE6, an enzyme which is important for transmitting light signals from the retina to the brain. And that is what Dr. Nevison Smith said. So it's a doctor. About 1 in 50 people are likely to be carriers of recessive traits leading to retinal degeneration. That's a pretty high number. And then they did a study on mice, and this is what I find interesting. So they tested sildenafil, which is the ingredient in Blue Chew, Viagra, on healthy mice and mice with the copy of that mutant gene that we have with RP. And they found that healthy mice experienced problems with their eyes for about 2 days. So that's the healthy mice. And it affected the vision of carrier mice of these vision problems like RP for 2 weeks. So, healthy mice, their vision was affected for 2 days. The ones with the mutant gene that carries RP, those mice were affected for 2 weeks. And they also found early signs of cell death in the eyes of carrier mice, suggesting sildenafil may cause degeneration in carriers of retinal disease. So that means for us fellas out there with RP, the sildenafil may kill our retinal cells, and we're not getting those back with RP. So what that means is, this is what the doctor said: if cells actually die in the retina, that would lead to blindness. Yeah, that's what happens with us. The doctor, Nevison Smith, said her team were concerned that people who have normal vision but who even just carry a single copy of the gene could be more susceptible to changes caused by sildenafil. Yeah, and this is likely to be a problem for the carriers of that mutant PDE6 gene because they produce less of that enzyme than normal. So boom, science has been done. Boner pills are messing with our vision, fellas. Be careful out there popping those blue chews. Do your research before you take any medication. And, for those that out you, I guess this is kind of funny. I thought about this. I'm not legally blind yet, so this article and research is geared more towards me because I don't want to lose any vision if I don't have to. But for those fellows out there who have lost most of their vision, and you want to take that risk, I'd say, hey, you might as well pop a blue chew. Have some fun. I might need these pills when I'm older, next year. In my 90s, I don't know. Anyways, I wanted to share this information because I wanted to tech the brethren out there who are thinking about using these products. All right, so with the wiener talk all out of the way, sorry everyone, I do apologize. Sometimes I want to be immature, man. You gotta let me sometimes, all right? But let's get on to some current events. All right, so let me take the shades off now, so I can face you guys. After that, very serious topic, I covered. Glasses are always dirty, man. When are they gonna invent glasses that don't get smudged? Is that technology even possible? I'd like to have that access to that technology. This is a product plug, and I'm not paid by them, but Zeiss wipes here are really good. They're lens wipes, come in a huge box. Great for cleaning your glasses. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes if I have a smudge on my glasses, in my mind, I'm like, oh no, there's another chunk of my vision going away. It's starting to affect my central vision. And then I look down at my glasses and then I'm like, oh, it's just a smudge. Does that happen to anyone else out there? All right, how's the hair? Looking good, guys. All right, so this next topic is a very cool one. It's a positive one. Let me have some coffee first. If you listen to this podcast, you probably already are aware that Molly Burke, who is a huge, influencer, she has RP like I have, like a lot of you have. She's a large following, millions of subscribers on YouTube, large Instagram, social media following. She was on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and she went on there to talk about blindness. And Trevor Noah seemed very interested in learning about, the stigmas around disability and blindness and how we're perceived incorrectly. And there's all these false perceptions. And he truly had an open mind, and it was a great segment. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'll post a link in the show description because you have to see it. It's a huge, huge moment for the RP community, and not only the RP community, but the blindness community too. I'll admit it, like I'm not the biggest Molly Burke fan. She doesn't make content for me. That's just how it is. Her content is more targeted towards women or younger girls. So I'm not in that target audience, but I do respect how she has such a large following. And I was stoked when she was on there and promoting everything. She said some really great things about dating, She talked about using a cane, having a guide dog. And it's just things like that that truly change perceptions. When I'm talking on this podcast, that's a goal of mine, is to have people who don't have a visual impairment or who are losing their vision or have a disability, they listen and they kind of learn and we grow from there. And it's hard to bridge that gap because I don't know if you notice this, but when you're on social media and all that, you're part of a community, but a lot of it's like, your own community. So how do you get those people to listen who aren't in the community? How do you bridge that gap? And that's something I'm always trying to think of. And having Molly Burke come on, a show as big as the Daily Show is huge. So I'm very happy that she was able to do that. And she sounded wonderful. She had great things to say. She did a great job. And kudos to Trevor Noah for bringing her on. And I hope he brings on more guests with disabilities and all that. There's a lot of undeniable talent out there in our community. And we all know it. We see it when we go on social media. We see it when we go online or YouTube. Whether it's an athlete, filmmaker, podcaster, activist, content creator, writer, fashion designer. There's so many talented people out there, musicians, the list goes on and on. I don't have time to do all the lists, but there's a lot of undeniable talent that is out there and deserves spotlight, And I'm not trying to take anything away from Molly Burke when I say this, but there are other people who could have represented blindness too. Molly Burke just happens to have the largest audience, and I don't want to come across as a hater, but when it comes to Molly Burke, she is in her own kind of category. She's in her own kind of world. She lives the life of an influencer, basically. It's cool. She's doing a thing and she's exposing, a lot of non-disabled or non-visually impaired people to RP and blindness. So I'll give credit due where credit's due. But, Molly seems to be in her own universe. I don't see her engaging that much with people in this space. I've reached out to her to try to have her on my podcast, Silence. I know other podcasters who have tried Silence. She probably wants money, and that's, maybe that's just the level she's at. So Molly, if you want to come on and have a real conversation, I'd love to have you come on. I'll end with this. Thanks for what you do, Molly. I sent your channel to my niece. It is a great way for people like my niece to learn about the eye disease that my mom has, or her grandma, and me, her uncle, and her aunt, my sister. We all have RP. So what you're doing is effective and you're crushing it. Maybe I'm just jealous. All right, next topic. Speaking of television appearances, Kamala Harris was the center of some trolling. Not new for her. Not new for any politician these days. But she was trolled by saying, and I'm going to read it, Harris was at a speaking event and introduced herself. This is what Kamala Harris said. I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. And I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. As usual, context helps, right? So when you hear that, she was at a speaking event celebrating, the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And, her description was meant to accommodate the blind and visually impaired people there and listening. So, that's the context of it. In fact, I didn't even need the context. When I heard her describe it, I was like, oh, she's doing that for, blind and visually impaired people. Because, I've been doing this podcast. I'm, learning. I've learned enough to where I heard that and I connected the dots, But, on the opposite side, I kind of understand why she got trolled a little bit for saying that. For those who are not active in our community, they hear Kamala Harris, just describing what she's wearing, saying the obvious, right? I'm a woman, I'm wearing a blue suit, I'm sitting at a table. That seems strange. So, I get it. This is the point I want to bring up. I know why she was trolled. She was trolled because there's a lot of there's a lot of ways that the left, and I want to remind everyone I'm an independent when it comes to politics. What I'm going to say is, the left, they're kind of, in some ways, they're overcomplicating language, descriptive language. But here's my theory, and I think, you guys know where I'm going to go with this. My theory is she was trolled because she followed up, her description of I'm a woman sitting at a table wearing a blue suit. That followed her saying her pronouns. My pronouns are she, her. That's a controversy that's going on. When it comes to, my personal opinion on pronouns, I don't really want to get too in depth on it, but, I choose to not I'm not actively saying my pronouns. When I introduce myself, I don't say my pronouns are. I don't have them in my Instagram, bio or whatever. And that's me personally. But, I will respect, your pronouns if you have a preference. As long as it's not like that Z-Zer, or Zim or those, kind of more out there, outlandish ones. That's my own personal opinion. There's a debate around pronouns. We can all agree on that. How about that? The right, meaning conservatives, GOP party, likes to poke fun at, pronouns and how the left uses descriptive language. For example, the Latin communities, the Latinx community, pregnant woman is a birthing person. There's some weird language going on out there. All in good spirit, all in trying to be inclusive. I get it. But the right's trolling the left for these, terms. And some of it's justified. But it follows Kamala Harris saying her pronouns. And this is my point. My point isn't about pronouns or any of that. My point is, this is like a slippery slope, right? In the sense that I don't want language that's meant to be accessible and inclusive to the disabled community to be considered as something. I don't want it to be considered something that only the political left do. It's not something to politicize. Accessibility isn't a conservative issue. It's not a Democrat issue. Just like blindness has a spectrum, people with blindness are on the spectrum of politics. There are blind and disabled conservatives. There are blind and disabled liberals. And there's people all across that spectrum, far right, far left, middle, centrist, whatever. But what I don't want the Republican Party to do is to associate inclusivity of disabilities as something that is considered woke. And I think that's what happened with this Kamala Harris blue suit thing. Everyone was making fun of her, calling her woke. They hear, now describing things for, people who are blind. Oh, that's something that only woke people do. And I don't like that at all. And I don't think that's fair. I think that's a lazy takeaway, to associate those things together. But that leads me to another point. Why is it that the left seems to be the only political party who uses inclusive language when it comes to, disabled people? And what's it matter to Republicans if descriptive language is used, for the blind and visually impaired? Do people get irritated when, you have, someone up there, ASL, signing, for the deaf community? This is the same thing, So it's don't make it something that it isn't. It's not political. Her describing her blue suit is not political. It's her being inclusive and providing accessibility for blind and visually impaired people. That's all it is. So that's my long story short. Accessibility is for all disabled people, no matter what political party you're with. Boom. That's all I have to say. All right, next topic. And it's in line with what I just talked about, and it's in line with language, which is kind of the theme of this episode. This is kind of a continuation of something I talked about in the previous solo episode I did when I mentioned Lizzo. Beyonce, she's in the hot seat now. For the same word that Lizzo got in trouble for, Beyonce's now in trouble for. How did this even happen? Beyonce's album came out like a month after this. Did Beyonce's team just ignore all that public news, like national news? Lizzo was on national news, so I don't know how this slipped past Beyonce's team. Part of me thinks she was trying to like sneak it through. Or maybe she wanted the controversies, to help publicize her album. I don't know. But it's funny to me how this happened. And for those of you who don't know, like Beyonce released a song. Same thing with Lizzo. They both put out songs that had a specific word in it. It starts with an S and ends with a Z. If you Google it, Beyonce lyric change, Lizzo lyric change, you'll find out what the word is. I'm not going to say it. It's the same word. Maybe Lizzo and Beyonce should record a song together where they're apologizing. But it's just kind of funny. It's like, I don't know. These artists put these songs out and then they immediately regret it and then they go into apology mode. I get it. This isn't the first time that this has happened. The funniest one to me, and I find it funny not because I find it funny for the fact that it happened. Sometimes some things are just so ridiculous that you find them funny. But, you remember that Black Eyed Peas song, Let's Get It Started? You remember what was in that? It was in the chorus. The R word was in the chorus of that song, which was on Top 40 radio. It was a hit. And that was only 18 years ago, which after learning that makes me feel really old, by the way. That song is 18 years old. That's incredible. Either that or my math is way off. Anyways, that's a good example of how, words change, over time. So you can say a word one day and then the next time you can't. And that's because, education happens. The meaning of words evolve. And that's just something you got to get comfortable with. Some people want to, whatever they were accustomed to saying younger, they're like, I'm saying that forever. I'm trying to evolve with the times where it makes sense to me. And I think that's what my next segment is about. And I want to talk about Matt Walsh, who, I don't know how many of you are actually familiar with Matt, but he's a, prominent, figure of the Daily Wire, which is a right-wing media company. Matt just directed a film that you may have heard of. It was very controversial. It was called What is a Woman? But yeah, let me talk about Matt, because this is, again, on the topic of language. And sorry, this episode seems political. I promise you, I'm not going to make this a political podcast. It's just the topics I'm talking about today around language, whether you like it or not, they're all kind of based off of politics and, left versus right, just like most things in life these days. So I'm trying to talk about these things. I hope you listen with an open mind, no matter what political party you affiliate with. I hope I have listeners on both sides. I don't want to have an echo chamber or bubble. So thanks for listening. But I promise you, this isn't going to be a political podcast. This is just the current events that's happening. But yeah, let's talk about Matt Walsh. He recently, part of one of his podcast episodes, he talked about how the Dallas Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones, apologized for using the M word. And this confused Matt. And I'm going to read you basically what he said, because I'm not going to play it for copyright reasons. I don't want to get into any troubles there. So I'm going to read you what Matt said. So imagine, hear it in like a really deadpan, voice. Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones issued an apology on Tuesday after using what has been dubbed the M word, and that's M as in Mary. Matt then goes to say, doesn't little person sound patronizing? You're saying, oh, look at that little person. To me, that seems more offensive than the M word. He then asked, has anyone explained what exactly is wrong with that word and what's the inherent quality that makes it offensive? Can anyone explain it to me? Or has it just been decided randomly because this is what they do? When he's talking about they, he's talking about the, liberals. He then goes on to say, this is what the PC police does. This is their MO. It just to go along and kind of just randomly change the labels for things. Oh, that label doesn't work anymore. That's expired. That word is past its expiration date. ... He then closes his statement by saying, sorry, not going to do it, can't do it, meaning he's going to continue to use the M-word despite knowing that it's offensive. All right, so let's break that down, Again, this ties in with a lot of the themes of this episode around language. Matt is a conservative, and he has an issue with not being able to use the M-word because he thinks that it's something that the left, the PC police, have just called it offensive without really any justification for saying it's offensive. He asked, why is that, like, who can explain this to him? Like, why is it offensive? And, with a simple Google search, why is, the M-word offensive? I found this on the Little People of America website, and I'm going to read it out, okay? Little People of America, the world's oldest and largest dwarfism support organization, and an international membership-based organization for people with dwarfism and their families, advocates to abolish the use of the word. It's the M-word. The M-word was never coined as the official term to identify people with dwarfism, but was created as a label used to refer to people of short stature who were on public display for curiosity and sport. Today, the M-word is considered a derogatory slur. The dwarfism community has voiced that they prefer to be referred to as dwarfs, little people, people of short stature, or having dwarfism, or simply and most preferably by their given name. That's common sense to me. When they surveyed their community about the usage and overall impact of the M-word, over 90% of the members of Little People of America stated that the word should never be used in reference to a person with dwarfism. And also, I learned from past podcast episodes, I've had guest Toria Jones on, and I've had Vinny Rupolo on, who both live with dwarfism. And Toria explained to me that, the word, the M-word, again, I'm not going to say it, is also, like the literal meaning of it is like small fly or gnat. Here's a fun fact. The Little People of America, which is where I quoted what I just quoted, was originally called the M-words of America in 1957. The name was changed to Little People of America in 1960. So that was over 60 years ago. So, Matt's having an issue with this word, but this was addressed 60 years ago. This isn't like a modern day thing, Matt. Like, this is something that has been addressed for over 60 years. So that's their own community saying, don't use this word. How is this something that the PC police are up to? And also, how did your team not search that and find that out for you? Or are you just trying to make anything and everything you can sound like, the liberals are ruining everything? So how exactly is this a woke problem if it's something that has been addressed for so long? And, with that said, like, I will say that, like, not all people care. Not all people from the dwarfism community have the same issue with this word. That's true. Matt's right about that. Some people probably don't care. Again, that's 90% of the Little People of America voted against using it at all. That's 10% who are in the gray. And then you also have people in the community who are not part of Little People of America. So it's not a universal thing. I admit that. But, language is tricky, right? For example, I know people in the disability community who use the word cripple, amongst their peers who are also disabled. And the word cripple is used as a derogatory slur if an able-bodied person says it. But, used amongst each other, it's kind of like, in term of endearment, something that you can only say to each other. So language is complicated. It's not something that you can just simplify. Again, this is going back to Kamala Harris describing the blue suit, for the blind and visually impaired listeners. Like, not everything needs to be made political. Not everything is the woke left trying to take away everyone's fun and make everyone talk in a way they don't want to talk. Like, that's not what's going on here. But I will say this, and if someone disagrees and has proof otherwise, I'd love for you to tell me, but it does seem, though, that the left is the only side really trying to be accessible. But with that said, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed by a Republican president, proudly too. So, I don't know, but like in terms of language, it's like, it does seem like in 2022 that the left is doing this, and then the right is viewing it as, accessible and inclusive language for people with disabilities, people with hearing loss, blindness. That's just something that the woke does. And I really do not want it to be associated with that, because that's going to make an even bigger stigma around it than there already is. So please quit politicizing accessible and inclusive language for disabilities. And I'll end on this. Matt, you know better, man. I know you do. You're a smart guy. In fact, what you did with this is, ironically enough, what you accused the left of doing. You're making something political when it shouldn't be. So use common sense, the thing you always talk about people need to use. All right, let's have a palate cleanser, all that political shit. Man, it's exhausting. That's kind of why I don't like covering it. I always get nervous when I talk about anything like this, because I'm like, I'm bound to piss someone off. So if I offended you, feel free to DM me, tell me how I offended you, but hey, I'm trying to be transparent here, and I'm trying to have real conversations, and sometimes being real is going to upset someone. And I don't claim to know everything, and I don't claim to be right about everything. So this is me speaking my current truth, which can change, as we all know. So work with me here, okay? In the last solo episode, I asked everyone who wanted to send me questions, because I'm going to have this new audience question section of the podcast. My dog Ruby called in the first time, if you remember, but now I have actual real humans. So again, I'm going to play a question from a listener. I'm going to answer it. And, if you want to send me a question, all you got to do is DM me your question. Send me a selfie of a video, DM it to me, email it to me, the seethroughpodcast@gmail.com. You can be in an episode. Just send me a question, and I'll answer it on a solo episode, or I might answer it on an episode with a guest. You never know. So let's get the first question up. Here we go.
Hey, Lance. Thanks for having me on, man. My name is Andy Ogg, and a longtime listener of the See Through podcast. Congratulations on your second year of putting them out there. Great content. I've been listening a long time, and I kind of get a feeling of where your vision is. I know you've seen your mother go down her trail, but I guess someone I'm a little bit further you on this journey. What are you going to miss most about seeing? What are you going to miss most about having more vision as it continues down this path? And I'm sorry if that's a hard question, but it's a good one that I never asked myself when it started.
Okay, that's a great question, Andy, and thanks a ton for sending that in and listening. It's awesome to connect with people who listen. What a great question. My wheels are already turning. Whew, let me think about that. So what will I miss most, when my vision has deteriorated? So what will I miss most? What will I miss seeing the most? I'll say this. Definitely, the first thing that comes to mind is the faces of people close to me, my wife, if I plan to have kids at some point, my kids' faces, yeah, that's gonna be hard. And I'm big into nature. I'm gonna miss, seeing a sunset or just seeing something, grand, a grand scenery. But yeah, it definitely is. It's gonna be, faces of people, including my own. It's beautiful. I'm just joking. I'm just trying to make light out of a heavy question here. But yeah, man, that's probably what I'm going to miss most is faces. And just kind of the small details of, of things. Like if my wife's wearing something really pretty, be able to see, her different outfits. And if my dog does something cute, or has a cute facial expression, I would hate missing things like that, moments that are one of a kind and aren't replicable, and descriptions can only do so much. That question got me, man. I guess I don't think about that. That's one of those things, where, while I'm open and transparent on here, I still suppress things, I guess. And I think that's one of them. I try to just adapt as I go. So I try not to get too far ahead of myself on my vision loss journey. So maybe that's part of it. But, I try not to think of what I'll miss out on seeing. But, you have a great point. And, I'm assuming you asked that question because you miss things yourself. But yeah, it's going to be loved ones for sure. Yeah. Great question. Got me thinking. Got me a little bit worked up, man. Got me a little emotional there. But hey, comes with the territory, doesn't it? Vision loss isn't a joke. Gets all the emotions going and all different kinds of emotions. And sometimes like just even being prompted a question like that or being forced to think about something that you try not to think about can get you. But, hey, this is part of the See-Through podcast, me being transparent, facing things, growing, talking, being open. So your question accomplished that. Thanks, Andy. You're the man. Thanks so much. But let's keep the party going. Let's keep this train moving. Here's the next audience question.
Hello, my name is Bethany Cody. I'm from Adelaide, South Australia, living on Ghana land. I would love to know, do you think it helps having family history of retinitis pigmentosa in terms of understanding what's happening to your sight and your mental health and how to live with the sort of constant loss that comes with RP? I'm curious because I have no family history of RP or Usher syndrome. And I found the initial experience of being diagnosed really isolating and lonely, and I had no one to look up to or learn from. So really curious to know your experience.
Bethany, what a great question. Also, you're a true champ. I love seeing how involved you are on social media when it comes to, the blind community, disabled community. So thanks for being everyone's champion and supporter. I definitely notice it and appreciate your support. Thanks for sending in a question and thanks for listening. And so let me answer your question. So the question was, do I find it helpful to have a family history of RP versus Bethany's, situation of, not having any family history? And yeah, I my first instinct of an answer is yes, it's helpful for me to have family history because of what you talked about. You mentioned isolation. I grew up with my mom having RP. So like, for example, whenever I was diagnosed with RP, it wasn't like this big shock to my system because I was kind of already familiar and aware of it. So that diagnosis kind of, I was eased into RP basically. It's kind of like training wheels for RP is having a family history. With that said, there are stresses that come with knowing the family history because you're kind of aware of like, oh, this is what my future has in store for me. So when I was like in high school and I was fortunate enough that RP was not affecting my vision at all in high school, really, or at least not to a noticeable degree. I played high school football, I played high school tennis, drove a vehicle. But, knowing that, I'm diagnosed with RP, knowing that my mom's legally blind, knowing that that's my future, I always had that thought in the back of my mind, like, don't enjoy your vision too much because it's going to go away. Whereas I think like looking back on it, if I had, if I wasn't diagnosed, because my doctors, basically I was diagnosed because my mom has RP and my doctors knew that there's a chance that I would have it. Same with my brother and sister. My brother doesn't have RP. He didn't inherit it, but my sister also inherited it. But that's the only reason I was diagnosed at age 12. That's when I was diagnosed by, my eye doctor with RP. But if I wasn't diagnosed at such a young age, I probably wouldn't have been diagnosed with RP until, my mid-20s, because that's when my vision started to decline. So I guess the pro of that is, the pro of not knowing in that situation is I would have had all those childhood years, high school and college, where I didn't know about RP. And maybe that ignorance would be bliss for that chunk of my life. But the con of that would be the diagnosis would sting harder. And then the transition into acceptance of RP would have been a lot harder. And it was already hard for me knowing I had RP. I kind of pushed it away and pushed it out of my mind. You probably heard me talk about that a lot on this podcast. And isolation. I think even people who have a family history still feel that same isolation to a certain degree. But I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Sometimes when I'm talking to my mom, I can ask her a question. When did this start happening? When did you experience this? My sister has RP too. We when we used to go to, the eye retinal specialist in North Carolina, we absolutely hated going. It's my least favorite day of the year. I would get very, depressed after because basically in those times where I would spend my time not thinking about RP, pretending I didn't have it, in those years that I would go, just reminded me that I did have it. And my whole point with talking about that is I had my sister to complain to. I had my mom to complain to. I had my dad who understood RP from being married to my, mom. So I had people around me who understood the frustrations, and that felt good. Whereas the isolation you feel may come from, not having that built-in support group. So there's pros and cons. Yeah, pros and cons, just like most things in life. So I hope that answers your question. And I really appreciate you sending that in. And I really appreciate you as a listener. Thank you. Again, if you're out there listening and you have a question for me, send it to me. It'll be featured in an episode and you'll hear it answered just like that. That's the format. Just send me your question, DM it to me, email it to me. I truly had fun answering those questions and they got me thinking, and I like connecting with people who listen. It makes me feel more connected to my own podcast. So thanks for sending that in, Bethany. And thanks again, Andy, for sending in your question. All right, but it's time to close out this podcast, and I'm going to close out this podcast. I'm going to close this podcast out in style. I'm putting the shades back on. These shades are by Warby Parker, by the way. Again, I'm not paid by these companies. I just really like Warby Parker. They have affordable, stylish prescription glasses and sunglasses. So if you don't have eye insurance and glasses are really overpriced to you, you most likely already know about Warby Parker, but consider Warby Parker. And that's my unpaid ad for them. Yeah, that was the solo episode. I hope you liked it. Thanks for listening. It's a big episode. It's episode number 70. I had the first audience question segment. That's a lot of fun. I look forward to doing more of those in the future. As I promised in the last solo episode, I do have merch coming. I'm just trying to make it slick. I'm trying to make it look as cool as possible. That'll be dropping in the near future. Get stoked on that. Send me a happy birthday message. My birthday is August 10th. So send me a birthday message. Yeah, and I talked about this a lot. While you have the option to send me a question, if you don't feel comfortable sending me a question, you can just reach out to me. Just send me a message. I'll respond. You can, if you have something to say or you have a question for me that you want to keep private, that's completely fine too. I like meeting, and talking to people who listen. So don't be scared to reach out. I've had people reach out to me, and every time they do, it just brightens my day, makes my day, and it recharges me and helps me keep going, because this podcast is a grind. It takes a lot of work. Again, it's self-funded. I don't make any money off this podcast. Consider becoming a Patreon subscriber, a member of the See-Through Few community over on Patreon. The link's in the show description. It's $5 a month. You get exclusive bonus content on there that you can only get there. So consider that. At the very least, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media. The handle's at See-Through Pod. Like this video. Comment for the algorithm. Leave a review on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. At the very least, just click the 5-star rating. Come on, help your guy out here. Help me grow this thing. It's been a fun process so far doing this, and I'm excited for the future. Again, thanks for listening. Stay transparent, everyone.